This lesson is about how to use Photoshop to change an image into a stencil that we can use for screen printing. So the first thing that we're going to do is go to Applications and open Photoshop, which is CS6. Okay. So now that you've got Photoshop open, just a few basic features of Photoshop. This is your toolbar here. Your toolbar has a whole lot of different tools. We're going to be using mainly the cutting tool today. We've also got our layers, so whenever you introduce an image into Photoshop, it creates a new layer and you can work in a whole lot of different layers. We have here what's called our canvas, and up here is your control panel. So you'll notice that as the tools change, so does the control panel, and the control panel will allow you to fine-tune some of those tools to make them either bigger or smaller, or there's lots of different features that each tool can be adapted to according to how you want to use the tool for the job you want to do. So we're going to go back to our cursor and we're going to find the image of yourself that you're asked to save to your desktop, and we're going to open that. So File, Open, and I'm just going to use an image that I found on the internet. So once you've got your image on the canvas, you'll notice also that there's a layer here. This is this first layer that we see here. Always in Photoshop, it's a good idea to copy your original image so that you've always got it in case you make too many mistakes. You can always go back to the beginning. So we do that by picking this layer up and we drag it down to that little square there, and then we have a layer 0 copy. You can rename that by double clicking on the letters, and we'll just call it working layer. For this particular job, however, it's not so important to copy it, and I'll explain why as we go. Alright, just a couple of other things about layers. You can turn the layers off. Wherever you see a grey and white checkered pattern, that means there's absolutely no visual information there. So if I turn our original layer on, I can actually see that original layer, but if I turn this one on top of it, I'm now looking actually at this one here. Okay, so I'm just going to highlight that and I'm going to put a lock on it. That means that I'm not able to work in this layer, so that means that I'm pretty well working in this layer here. Okay, now that we have our image in front of us and we've talked about the toolbox, control panel, canvas, and our layers, we want to start turning this into a stencil for our screen print. But the first thing we want to do is we want to get rid of any of this color information because it's not important to us. We go Image, Mode, and we're going to work in grayscale. And it's going to ask us to merge our layer. Now it's going to ask us to discard color information. So we click on Discard and now it's gone gray. It's also merged our two layers. Now the reason it's done that is because both our layers are in grayscale. It wasn't really necessary for us to copy that earlier layer, but I just think that it's a good thing to get into the habit of doing. But we've now got our information in grayscale. With stenciling, areas of detail like hands, for example, can be really tricky. So we want to simplify our image so that any areas of detail that is going to be hard to work with, it's a good idea to get rid of that. We also want to emphasize the face because that's the main feature of our stencil. And if the face is too small, it's going to be too fiddly to get in some of those identifying details that's going to make it look like you. So we're going to go to our cropping tool. You'll notice that there's a tiny little arrow here. If you hover directly over that arrow and press Control or hold it down, you'll see a number of other tools behind this cropping tool. So some of you mightn't see your cropping tool. Instead it might be a slice tool. We don't want the slice tool. So again we're going to press Control, hover over the arrow, click, Select that, and we're going to go to our cropping tool. Now you'll notice this now has little corners, okay, and we're going to bring those corners in so that we're going to emphasize this student's face, okay. I'm going to bring it up here roughly to the dimensions of an A4 page, because that's going to be the size of your image, an A4 page. And that's determined by the size of the screen prints that we have. If we have larger screen prints, then we can use an A3. But at the moment, we've got the A4 screen prints. You can select crop again, or you can press enter. Crop the image. Yes, we want to crop it. Okay, you'll notice there's still those little corners there. We don't really need those because we've already cropped our image. So I'm going to go back up to the cursor. We go back to our normal kind of tool, which is our cursor arrow. The next thing that we're going to do is to make sure that our image prints out to fill an A4 page. It's really difficult to tell the actual size of this image. So if I were to go print, this image doesn't even fill up an A4 page. Okay, it only fills up about 1/8 of an A4 page. So what we need to do is make sure that we adjust the actual size of this image so that it fills up the A4 page. Now an A4 page, if we're looking at the American metric system, is 8 inches by 10 inches. So if we go image size, okay, this is in centimeters at the moment. We could leave it in centimeters. I'm just more familiar with the American metric dimensions, so I'm going to change it to inches. Now we have to make sure that the longer side is no more than 10 and the width, or the shorter side, is no more than 8. Now watch what happens when I change this to 10. This one automatically changed to 7. So when you change the height, it automatically changes the width, and that's because you've got this box here called constrained proportions. That means that as you change the height, the width will automatically change. So the height equals 10 inches, the width shouldn't be any greater than 8, which it isn't, so we'll click OK. So just to test this and see whether it fills up our whole A4 page, I'm going to go File, Print. Beautiful. So we can probably even make that a little bit bigger by changing that. I'm not going to press print because we're not ready to print yet, but it is definitely the size that we want. So we'll just press cancel for now. Just a few basic Photoshop tools that'll help you enormously. Okay, if you want to undo something, you hold down Alt and Command and you press Z for the number of steps that you want to go back. If you want to deselect something, so say you've used one of the selection tools to select part of the image, like this. Okay, here's our magic wand tool. Let's say I've gone around like that. You can see all these running little ants. Okay, I can delete that section, and now we have no more information in there. I'm going to go Alt-Command to undo that step, and I no longer want all this selected, so I'm going to go Command D, and that's deselect. At the moment I'm finding this image a little bit too big to work on, so I'm going to zoom out by going Command minus. So I'm holding down Command and just pressed minus once. So we now have an image that's in grayscale. It's in a good size for printing. What we want to do now is create a greater contrast in the image, because we want a stencil of basically 3 colors, a black, a white and a gray. So the best way to do that is to go Image, Adjustments, Brightness, Contrast. We're going to increase our contrast, but we don't want to get rid of all the areas of detail. So I've taken that up to 73. I'm going to click OK. Let's see what that looks like in terms of developing a stencil. We're going to go to Image, Adjustments, and we're going to go down to Posterize. That's looking pretty good. We haven't lost any of the detail in some of those important areas like the eyes, the mouth. A little bit of detail is lost in here, but but that's going to be easy to draw in. It's just a straight line down there. That is a pretty good stencil. We have lost detail in the hair, but that's not something that we wouldn't be able to draw back into. Just have a look at what happens to the levels. Okay, so you can move your cursor along, but I think Photoshop has opened this up in probably the best position, which was a 4. So I'm going to go back down to a 4. And look at what happens when we go down to a 3. And a 2 basically goes down to black and white. And you can see we've lost some nice tonal quality there. So I'm going to trust Photoshop, and I'm going to click 4. Now, that is actually enough for some of you to say, hey, I've got my image for my stencil. I can print out 3 or 4 of those, and I'm ready to go. But for others, it might be a little bit harder to create just that 3 or 4 tone stencil. So another step we can do is to work in bitmap mode. So we go image mode, bitmap. Okay, it's asking us to flatten layers. Just press OK. Now, bitmap kind of turns it into what you would expect to see if you got a magnifying glass and had a really close look at comics that are printed in newspapers. At the moment, I've got an output of 70 pixels per inch. Could change it to centimeters if I wanted. And I actually have been experimenting with these. You can do the same thing, but I'm going to go to halftone screen. I'm going to click OK. Okay, now this is telling me the shape of the little dots. You'll see what I mean in a moment. I'm going to click the shape of the little dots, and it's going to be diamond. I'm just going to click OK. Let's see what happened. And it's actually turned into something that looks like printed material out of a newspaper. If we go Command plus plus plus, I'm going to go Command minus minus minus, and I'm going to step back a step so that I go back to my stencil. Okay, I'm going to change it a little bit so that we can see the kind of things that, or the kind of options. Alright, so I'm going to change that to 15. We'll see what happens. Variable, 20 lines per centimeter. Could change it to, let's change it to round. Click OK. What's this one doing? Maybe some of those dots could be closer together. But the point is, you need to have a look at bitmap. I'm going to go Alt Command Z again, so we're back to our original image. You need to go back to bitmap and play around with it until you're actually quite happy with it. I'm going to try that. Try squares, see what happens. Let's have a look. Oh, I don't even know what that looks like. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. Quite happy with that. Nice and clear. Quite happy with that. Admittedly, some of the details are lost just here, but that's going to be easy to draw those back in when it comes to your stencil. You can go File, Print, so that it does fill up the screen. I think your layout needs to have that clicked. What you need to do is make sure your teacher has a copy of your stencil, a digital copy, whether it's on a USB or you've emailed it to your teacher, and that's it.